Well, we set out to do some fact-checking today after a number of media outlets started running dramatic headlines about what they are calling a series of suspicious fires at black churches in the weeks since the Charleston shooting. The latest, Mount Zion AME Church in Greeleyville, South Carolina. It's the 7th fire at a church in recent weeks, leading to suggestions that hate crimes are to blame. In the newspapers like the Baltimore Sun, we see headlines like "Black Churches Burning." In case you missed the hint, the Washington Post put up an article about the fires headlined, "Why Racists Target Black Churches." And in the New York Times, they point out that the black church in South Carolina is just the latest to burn. It sounded like an epidemic, so we asked Dana Loesch to help us with some research, and she's the author of Hands Off My Gun, as well as radio talk show host with Radio America. Dana, good to see you tonight. And so
Thanks, Megan.
The suggestion is that all these churches have burned due to arson and due to hatred against African Americans. Is it true?
No, it's not. And the headlines of black churches burning, there are also white churches burning as well. And believe it or not, there are two media entities, and it's kind of insane to even, you got to give credit where credit is due. The Los Angeles Times and the Washington Post, one writer with the Washington Post, actually set out to make somewhat of an incomprehensive list just to see, of the 14 incidents that have occurred in the past 2 weeks, how many of those are arson, how many of those are hate crimes, how many have been like accidental or lightning, because Mount Zion, the church last night, as we know, the fire department and law enforcement officials said that that was started by lightning. Now, what has been discovered is that out of all of these incidents, there are only 2 confirmed cases of arson. Others are being investigated as lightning strikes, accidental, and nothing, Megan, nothing is being investigated as a hate crime. In fact, one of the most recent ones was a predominantly white church in Tallahassee. That was a lightning strike. There are black and white churches that are being affected. Now, arson's a serious crime, and definitely anybody who is committing arson, they should be prosecuted. They should be punished for it. And anyone who has racist motivations should definitely be investigated for using that motivation to go out and burn down churches. But for media to have all of these headlines, like the one, Megan, the ones you were mentioning, to say, oh, it's just all these black churches that are getting burned down, it's hyperbole.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the numbers, and just since June 20th, the one in New Hope, West Melbourne, New Hope Lutheran Church in Florida, that was arson. Right. It's not a black church. There was one in New York caused by lightning, so it wasn't arson. There's another one accidental. These are all non-black churches, one in Ohio, one in California, one in New York. Non-black churches that have burned that they ignore in coming up with their stats, and that's just 6 that I have right in front of me.
Yeah, and today, Megan, it came out a church in Colorado Springs had notified law enforcement because there were racial signs posted outside of their church, and they found the culprit. The individual whom they arrested was a black man. So, I mean, there are black and white culprits that have been arrested, because some of the fires that law enforcement, as they're investigating, they discover that there's been a theft, and someone will set a fire to hide the theft, which, never helps to commit a crime, to hide a crime. But that's the reality of what we're dealing with. And I have to kind of question the motivation of these media outlets that are irresponsibly running these headlines, Megan, before the investigations are even completed. How can you even make such a claim?
I know. Well, I mean, some folks are pressuring some news people to get this story. It's a black church and it's burning. Get it on the national airwaves right now.
Right.
And it's like black churches and white churches sometimes get hit by lightning, which is what happened last night. As another network was making a big deal out of it. It's like sometimes lightning strikes.
Right. Yeah, it does. My father-in-law is a pastor. He's a preacher of a church, and his home got hit by lightning and burned down last year. But I understand people are trying to look for patterns. They're trying to look for some sort of patterns in this story. But I think in that they're also looking for narratives too.
Well, I'll tell you, it's very frightening, because here we are at 9:29, and at 9:02 I had a discussion about how you have a better chance of being hit by lightning than in dying in a terrorist attack, and now we're talking about how often lightning strikes. So I think we've managed to really scare people.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Yay, weather.
Dana, great to see you.
Thanks, Megan.